like that's the only reason why I'm clarifying.
It's
So
so
you would
it
believe that all the different like hard copies of the Quran that I can get today, some with like completely different word substitutions, would you say that all of them are together one Quran
yeah.
or just variations of the same Quran?
Yeah, so if you take that and hear it from an outside perspective, which is yourself's perspective, then the answer is always going to be no, right? But if you add 5% of context to it, you're going to say, okay, that makes perfect sense. Like, well, of course I would, right? So the Quran was revealed, and this is a part of the Quran. It actually states this within the book. It says it comes out in different creedals, in different, what's the word? Sorry, arch dialects. Thank you. So ways of pronouncing it. Not sentences are added and stories have changed for the time being for people, or things are manipulated different ways. No, it's it's an Arabic language. It's different to English, so we don't really have that. But have you seen like Latin or other languages that they have little marks above letters to make things sound different? Have you heard that before? Seen that before ever? Because it's hard to explain with English speaking people rather than people who speak Arabic. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you ever seen other languages that have certain like marks and diets on top of letters to make them sound different?
James, he's talking like in Spanish, you know how you have the squiggle over an N to make
Yeah,
an
thank you.
NY sound. That's
Yeah,
what he's
I'm
talking
I'm
about,
trying to get
Yeah,
diacritic
like
marks.
yeah. So
I'm
so the
trying to get
point
like a real example up for him real quick because it's actually not just like different vowing or
there's
just different
maybe
pronunciation. Like I'll give you like example
but
in
the
this
word's
link
always
I'm
the
going to
same though.
share.
That's the point.
Would you just 1 second? In this link I'm going to
Actually, it's
share,
not.
like there are some that like for example, it's a completely different word. Like I'll give you an example. The Quran says one version says feeding a poor person, the other one says feeding poor persons. So that could give you like a completely different
Yeah, in English,
theological
but you need to
result.
understand the Arabic though.
Well, this is
That's the
what the
point,
Arabic
right?
means.
Because
That's what I'm
if,
saying.
if
Yeah,
we're
yeah. Well, no, no, because the ancient Arabic didn't have the marks over the letters that hadn't been invented yet. So depending on how you pronounced it, you actually had different words with the exact same letters. Just like ancient Hebrew was had the same problem.
Yep, let me so I put a link up top if you want to like click on it and just kind of follow along and give me
the
your thoughts
problem
on
the
this.
prop the problem with the problem because I'm waiting for the example, right, and then we'll delve into the example, right. The
Oh,
problem is
it should be right up top for you.
okay, so there are now different. Okay,
Yes,
different Arabic
click on
versions of the Quran.
yep, click on that one, the
Yep.
link, and then if you scroll down, it'll start showing you like the different physical copies of the Quran that you can get today. The majority of Muslims use the Hafs. Now, I won't hit you with
All of them are accurate. Every single one. Like I'm a Sunni Muslim, which is the mainstream Islam. None of us say one of these Qurans are appropriate. We say every single one is. They all mean the same. They all have the
so so
same
let
sentences.
so
They
let
all
me
have the
ask
same
you this
meanings.
part first before we get down to some of the individual words. So the Hafs, the gentleman who recited the Quran, they trust him with that he recited the Quran accurately for majority of Muslims to use it, but they don't trust him with hadith. They believe that
The different
he was
sciences,
just
totally different sciences, and the Hadiths don't
well,
have the same critique that we do with the
what
Quran
I
because
mean
one's
is well, what I mean by the argument is that the Quran seems like that is a big thing, something you wouldn't want to mess up on, something that has to be protected. But then the Hadith is just like sayings and quotations passed down from those around the Prophet and the Prophet.
yeah,
But that seems like that's a smaller thing. But it seems like they don't trust him with this small thing, but they trust him with this big
different
thing. And just
different
from an
sciences,
outsider,
different sciences, different sciences. You need to have different type of skills. That's like saying a biologist, right? Why can't he do physics? Like they're two
well,
different sciences.
can you maybe explain? So, for example, one is the full recitation of the Quran
I'll tell you. I
takes
know the
about
difference.
two.
I know the
Well,
difference.
just hold on. I'm just going to lay out this question, and then I'll let you respond.
Yeah, yeah,
So one is the full recitation of the Quran that'll take you about 22 hours in perfect structure. The
yeah,
other one is just quoting Muhammad as saying two sentences.
yeah. Okay.
That's
So
that's
one,
the
I
distinction.
want to answer it in one or two sentences. The Quran is a linguistic science, and the Hadith is a historical science. The way you are able to get the text and analyze it, one's in a linguistic themed science, and the other one is a historical. You need to be able to, with the hadiths, you need to be able to have these references, have these chains of narration, be able to speak the different languages to ask about the geographical location of these people and what they've been able to have been in this situation to say these things or see these things. Like it's first person narratives taking from historical standpoints within time to calculate the hadiths. The Quran is you analyzing. Let's say what you just said, right? Historical or Oriental Arabic in those times. And so one's linguistic and one's historical. There's two different things. So
S-
if you are a
what I'm
linguistic if you're a linguistic expert in Arabic, it doesn't necessarily mean you have the criteria to talk about historical statements that were said in the past.
what I'm saying is that you have he's pretty close to the prophet. Like it's not like he was really far removed away. So the way I'm seeing it is you have this gentleman who believed that Muhammad was conveying the words of God, so much so that he memorized a perfect representation of the Quran. But then at the same time, they believed that other times where he quoted the prophet, that he might not have been so honest, that there is suspect with his hadith. So
No,
my
that's
issue
not
and my
true. That's not true.
concern is that you have like one or two lines that you're questioning, but 22 hours of reading perfectly, you're saying this has to be trustworthy. I just don't see the distinction.
Right, because when the your question is confusing because I feel like I've answered it because of the difference between the linguistic science to it to the historical science to it. So can you rephrase what you're asking basically, why can't you critique the Quran when it's easy to critique the hadiths?
So so I'm not saying the critique of them.
Right.
So maybe that's where we're talking past each other. I'm saying so let's say you and I hang out for a while and I give you a chapter to memorize, 5, 10 pages, and I give you one sentence that I say to you,
Yeah, yeah.
and now you have the sentence, but you also have the chapters, the 5 pages that I keep reading over and over to you. So the one takes a lot more memorization time, takes a lot more ability to remember, but the other one is just a simple sentence that I said. Now imagine it's a few years later and we found out that there was a reason to question your quotations from me. Now, we're only wanting to question that one sentence, but we're not wanting to question the 5 pages. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So okay, I understand exactly what you're saying, right? So the theme of the Quran within the time of the Prophet was the word from Gabriel, what's his name? Gabriel, the angel Gabriel, that spoke down the words to the Prophet. And before he wrote it down, he was instructed to speak the words, right? To all of his, we call it Sahaba, which is the people that follow the Prophet. All of them, there's like hundreds of them, right? And to have your 5 daily prayers be permissible, you need to take these words and repeat them on a daily basis every single day. It's repeated over and over and over again. And each single different follower of the Prophet of the time he was alive, getting this revelation, wrote these words down, memorized them by heart. Because every day you had to repeat these words when you're praying, right? So something that you have to memorize every single day. And the Prophet, because you're not a Muslim, so you won't have this foundational understanding, right? But if you do believe that God was speaking to that man and God was having a communication from himself to his people, the idea of them not being able to take it in or memorize it or repeat it after revising it every single day of their whole life, compared to something the Prophet once said, which is now me speaking with the hadith, a quote the Prophet once said one time when he was walking down the street, maybe to somebody. Those are two different things. That's like saying, can you memorize the equation for pi? Yes, because we repeated it in classes every single day. Can you remember that question that was in your exam for your SATs? Of course not. You just heard it once. The
So
Quran
the issue
is a
was
text that people repeat every single day
so
to
the
have
issue
their
was
prayer
not
completed.
I'm sorry, the issue was not his memorization because they said that was really good. Like he memorized the whole Quran. But the issue that they were laying out was his honesty. And so they're
Whose honesty?
believing that they can't the Hafs, the gentleman who
Who's
recited that
Hafs?
recitation.
What's his name? Who are
I
you talking
I
about?
forget the full Islamic name, but that's his recitation. Give me 1 second.
Hafs. I don't think is I'm so confused. Hafs. I don't think that was the Sahaba at the time of the Prophet. I think you're talking about someone who has written the Quran recently, or
Go
his
um,
rendition of the Quran is what you're talking
click
about.
on
But
the link.
he didn't make these words up.
Click on the link above, and it'll
Okay.
actually tell you the name of the different Qurans, and you can see the one I'm talking about. And it tells you who the reader is, his Islamic name, how to pronounce that. His would be the the fifth physical book photo that you can see down at the bottom.
Okay. I don't understand. I think did I not just answer that?
Okay, I mean we can call it right there because we're kind of going
Right.
back
So
and
so
forth
but
on
let
it.
me just make it as clear as possible, right? So obviously you're not Muslim, so you're gonna be like, what do you mean God? God speaks to X person. When God speaks to X person, God says, before you write anything down, I'm going to relay my words. You need to preach them. And through your daily prayers, you need to repeat them, right? A part of these words that's in the Quran that came up from God to X person was that I am bringing this book down in many dialects, not phrases or wordings, dialects, so it could be spoken coherently through all of humankind. That is a text that has come down from God to X man. So it's already prophesied, right? So the idea of it even existing is affirming a prophecy. That's number one, right? Number two, since it's an oral tradition, the idea of saying things in different qira'ats, which is the Arabic phrase of quotations or marks on letters, is irrelevant, right? Because as long as it's an oral revelation, as long as it sounds correct, the way you write it down is irrelevant, right? So, for example, if the oral tradition of the Quran was this X way of saying things, right, but it was never written down, but someone in Kenya heard it and wrote it down in their own form of Arabic, and they had to add extra lines and squiggles around each word to make it sound the way he heard it. If he comes to an Arabic person and shows him the text and compares it to the Arabic text, of course it's going to be different because the way they write Arabic is different. However, as long as you both close the book and read it out loud and it sounds exactly the same because it's an oral revelation, that all that matters. I could have English, I could have Arabic that has a bunch of squiggles on top of it in my own conformed language and compare it to the Arabic Oriental back in the day. And it might be both be different on paper, but as long in prayer you are speaking it and it sounds exactly the same, it's relevant. Does that make sense? That's like having two books of Shakespeare and us as English people writing it down and using our own language. But in 100 years from now, English changes. You have to use squiggles on top of words to make it sound correct. And although the English looks different on paper, when we speak it out loud, Shakespeare sounds exactly the same. Has Shakespeare changed? Yes or no?
Shakespeare has not, but there's not different readings of Shakespeare, meaning that Shakespeare doesn't have different readings with different
The
words.
prophet has come out already, and so that's I didn't add as well. Sorry. So the same way I said our God Allah came down and spoke to the prophet through his angel and said there's going to be a bunch of different linguistic ways of writing the Quran in the future when he spread it around the world. Other words like king or ruler on the first chapter of the Quran is going to be changed, right? So when the prophet was praying at the Kaaba and he said one
So
surah,
for
X surah,
so for
and
example,
let me just finish this. Let me just finish one last thing. If a prophet spoke and started to pray in front of all of his people, and he said that surah, and one rendition he said king, And another rendition, he said ruler. Those are two different words. So the reason why you might see on one book of the Quran it say king, and another book it says ruler, it was because when the angel came down and gave them the surah, he said it in different ways. You can either say king or you can either say ruler. So in resuscitation, both words are permissible. But if one person in one Quran wants to use the word king and the other person in another Quran wants to use ruler, it's acceptable.
So let me give you this other one. So, and in this link up top, it's got two Qurans side by side, and it's got the variations. So one says two works of magic, the other one is two magicians. So one is describing two acts of magic, the other one is saying that there were two magicians, which is a very different distinction because one is talking about the acts, the other one's talking about how many are there, which is definitely different, and the Arabic is different, and they do get pronounced differently depending on your reading.
Yeah, of course. And that's the problem with taking the Arabic language and placing the exact meaning in English and saying, look at the contradiction, right? If I say to you right now in English, I'm broke right now, what does that mean to you? That means you're just, oh, you have no money in your pocket, right? But if an Arabic person takes that and says, what do you mean you're broke? What part of you is broke? It's a confusion to you. But if you are an Arabic linguist, sorry, and you heard those two phrases, and then you ask him, does that make any is this can this be contextualized as being the same meaning? Yes or no? And if he comes to you and says no, it can't, then khalas, you've contradicted the Quran and it's not fallible as we said it was. But the way you've just broke it down in English and said, look, this is a contradiction, you need to come to me and say to me the Arabic meaning, the Arabic wordings, and the Arabic foundations of each letter, each word, and how it contradicts. That's how you handle these
So
things in a
familiar
good
with
faith way.
are you familiar with Farid Responds?
Farid responds, yeah, I know who he is.
Okay, so Farid Responds
I
actually
actually
does
watched his
not
video on the exact quote you're talking about.
Yep, I actually have one on my YouTube channel with him as well. So he disagrees with you on this particular part. He would recognize that what I just told you will sound differently in the Arabic depending on the recitation. It's not going to sound identical. He
The
will
meaning is
actually
the
agree with
same.
you that, like, there's completely, in some cases, different words. What he will say, though, his argument is that he believes that all variations are from the angel Gabriel and they all complement each other.
Yeah,
That
that's what
is
I
his.
said.
But no, what you were telling me earlier is you were saying that they were all pronounced the same, but that's clearly not the case. And you
I
were
didn't say
saying that the
that.
words, but you said the words mean the exact same thing, but that's clearly
No,
not
no,
the
no.
case either.
I said the first. You're conflating 2 points. The first part, yes, I said that. But then going back to certain words being different, I said the angel Gabriel spoke to the prophet and said you could say in X way like king, or say in Y way like ruler. Both are acceptable, and when you're reciting them, they're both permissible. That's what I said. And that's actually quoted straight from Farid Responds, actually, as well. Thank you for giving him a shout out. And that was the simplest of ways to handwave a lot of, not Christians, but people trying to contradict the Quran, because you get one Quran that says king, another Quran that says ruler. Look, contradiction, but it's an
Well,
oral
we
recitation.
would be
Both are
like
permissible.
that. I could see. I could say, okay,
It's
ruler
orally
king.
permitted.
I could say, okay, that's fairly close. But when I read like this one, and the direct English, and you can see in the link above where it shows you the Arabic different. It even shows you the pronunciation, and it's pronounced differently. It says, "And many a prophet fought." Then the other one it says, "And many a prophet was killed." So one is clearly saying they were
That's
fighting.
totally fine.
One
That's
was
totally
clearly
fine.
one second, let me land. One was clearly saying they were killed. But if I didn't ever hear that recitation, the only thing I would get from the one is that many a prophet fought.
Yeah, and both are permissible. Do you not hear the second thing I just said? If it's an oral recitation and you're not taking it from this is God's word, I think you're saying I'm not a believer of this God, so I'm not going to hold any type of metaphysical powers in this, so this can't be acceptable. If God is speaking to that person or an angel speaking to X person and asking him to recite this orally and says to him, you can say this as in king or you can say this as in ruler, then exact the same logic as you can say he's fought these people or you can say the prophet died or the people died for these people. They're both permissible. These things that you're talking about both are tested and accepted because these both are accepted as surahs. If what you'd be right, and I think we're concluding this, you'd be right if you could find a rendition of a surah or a text or a qiraat that says X and another Quran that says Y, and Muslims argue against it, saying one's right and
So
one's wrong. But each
so let
Muslim sect,
so
whether
let me
Sunni, Shia, Shiite, we all accept and agree every rendition of the Quran is the Quran. None of us have any disagreement on this.
so let me give you an example of somebody doing X and not X, and this is in the Quran.
Yeah.
Um, and the link's above so people can follow. But it says the one says they lie. The next version
No,
of the
but what's the
Quran
sentence?
says,
What's the whole thing though? That's too. Come
well,
on,
if
bro.
you
That's
can
too
follow
short.
along, it's in that link above.
Where?
Because
What
the
part
first
of it?
one, you go down
Because they
to
lie is literally two words. Like, come on, we
almost.
can't analyze two words.
Well, no, I mean it shows you the Arabic writing. I don't know all the spacing in the
But
Arabic,
what's the whole English translation of it?
but then the not X's, it says they were lied to or they deny. So
But what's the
one
well?
is
Come on,
they.
you can't just take two
So
words
one
and
is
what's the whole sentence?
well, what I'm saying. Well, I'm just trying to show you the particular word that is different, like where the difference is within that. All we're doing is like highlighting that because
That's
in
not
this thing
enough.
it
Yeah,
says they
that's
lie, the other one says they were lied to, which lying to is far
they
different
both make the same.
than
If
being
we want
lied
to
to.
if we want to
Or sorry,
remove the con if we
hold on,
want to
hold on one
remove the
second, one second. Let me just state this without without causing myself a tongue twister. So one is very clearly it's saying they lie. The other one
yep
is they were lied to, which one
yep
is implying either you're a liar or you're being lied to. Now,
yep
Fareed says both those complement each other, but
they
he
do.
admits that they're completely different.
Yep, they do, and they complement. And they're both different. And because you're not, and I'm not saying you're being bad faith here. I can easily just, I don't even know what the whole context is, but right now I could hypothesize a situation where they both have different meanings, but they both complement each other right now. I could do it in 2 seconds, right? For example, they could have a surah or a story that explaining a group of people that have been lied to, right, in that oral recitation. So X story, these group of people were lied to. And then another situation, another way to pronounce it in an oral way is X Surah talking about a group of people that lie to these people. Do you know what I'm trying to say? And I know, don't be bad faith and say, actually, I can't wrap my head around this. This is very easy to follow, right? One group of people were lied to, and another way to rendition it is they were, or these group of people lied to them. They both make sense and they both complement, but they both linguistically have two different meanings if you remove all the context around them. They both tell the exact same story. We need to find a story.
So,
Like I could do this with the Bible because I've done like six with you now in a row. I could do this with the
so
Bible
the
where it's
thing.
clear numerical
Well, hold on. Let's
contradictions,
let's
but
not make it a.
these have the same.
Let's not do a
Do you
two-quay
know what I mean with
fallacy.
my answer though? Right? Does
Hold
that
on,
make
hold on.
sense?
No, no, look. Let's not do a two-quay fallacy. I'm always happy at some point to talk about the Bible with you, but I would
Forget the
say though, if
Bible.
you were to,
Does that make sense though? My answer.
I, I, I can understand what you're saying because you're just saying that all the variations of the Quran that I see, even the ones that have extra words or have different words that mean completely different things, that all those are from the angel Gabriel given in that variation to complement each other. I can
Which they
understand
do.
what you're
Which they
saying.
do. They do. If they didn't, then
My
you'll be correct.
my issue is that um, it almost sounds like a just so story based on a one hadith. So you've got one hadith that talks about these various readings, but you don't have all the readings still. Like I think some of the readings are gone,
All of them.
which one
That's the point of it. They could all disappear right now, and only one can exist, and that's still permissible to be the Quran. That's the point.
yes, but hang on. So if let's say out of those readings, let's say something happened and all the Muslim community has was the Hafs, you could
Yeah.
say that they have the Quran,
Yeah.
but could you say that they have the intended meaning of the Quran when they're not getting the variation that complements each other and
Yeah.
gives a deeper
Yeah.
meaning?
Because each variation has the exact same meaning. Each variation, if I tell a story to someone to tell them to not go in the ocean because a shark will kill them, right? Using a simple analogy. But the way the analogy was explained changed four different ways by switching one or two different words within the story. Is that the same story being told? Yes. Of course it is. Of course it is. Now, for you to come, not you as an individual, but what you're trying to prove here is there needs to be some sort of numerical contradiction between one Quran and another Quran. For example, if we're talking about those people who were lied to, if you came to me and said, those people have never been lied to, and then another Quran said, those people have always been lied to or have been lied to, that is a contradiction that cannot be hand waved, that cannot be rationalized, that cannot be backed, and we need to accept it and move on. But these things that you're giving me examples, I don't even have the context to, but in 2 seconds, I could easily hypothesize how to add rationality to it to make it
Ha-
have the exact same meaning.
Have you ever heard of
But
game theory?
I've heard it before, but I'm not big into these type of like,
So,
but
so
go on.
think of it like this, and probably theory crafting would be a much better and way to go instead of game theory. So theory crafting is where we look at something that seems to be in conflict, and so then we look for a way to give it conflict resolution. And so when presented with Qurans that have different Arabic words that mean different things, we either have to bite the bullet and say that there's a direct conflict, X and not X, or we have to find a way to make those harmonize. And so the way that I believe that Muslims have done that when these variations exist is to say that they complement each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and you build. This is now. This is my response. This is a Christian's response, right? That would be something in the Bible was said, and now in 2023 things are discussed, and we're trying to revert it in these type of ways. You'd be right if this issue or this point was not prophesied by the prophet through his lips. If the Quran just spread out through the world, and then because of it, the words changed and the way we wrote the letters changed, and then now the imams of the world came together and said, actually, the reason why these things are the case is because of X, Y, and Z. You'd be right, but how about this, James? Before the Quran was even written, the Prophet came out and said that this will happen before the Quran was even, for example, king and ruler, right? Let's say a surah came out a certain time and the word king was used. Before the angel came down and said, use the word ruler as well, the prophecy of saying that words will change that mean the same meaning, or the different qira'ats, which is dialects, will come out, came about. So I don't like this can easily be pointed out with almost any type of religious prophecy. I could point to
So
it of
the
multiple
thing,
situations in the Bible and the Quran. The prophets already spoke about this. So it's not
so the
game
last thing that
theory.
I'll say, sorry, I went with the theory crafting analogy instead of game theory, but
Can't be
so
game
the
theory if the
last thing,
person making the game points it out.
yeah, but so I'm just that's what I'm saying. I switched to the theory crafting analogy, but so think of it like this: when I look at the Hadith, Muhammad Hijab has said this publicly that the majority of the Hadith is fictitious,
He didn't
and
say that.
it's only he did. There's video of it
Yeah, you know what?
online,
Actually, I agree. I agree. There's a lot of fabricated
and
hadiths. I agree with that.
yep. So when I hear that, and then you point to one or two Hadith, and you say that these Hadith are saying that there's different recitations, and it was revealed in these different ways by the angel Gabriel. And then at the same time, I run into a Muslim who will reject all the authentic Hadith about Aisha being 6 during the time of their engagement and 9 during conception, then it puts so much doubt into me believing that one hadith. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. 1 second. Okay, go ahead. So you're basically saying that this makes a good point. You're saying, Bobby, but this reference you're using is a hadith that made this point, and because other people of knowledge in Islam have pointed out hadiths can be weak at times, why should I use this as an indicator of truth? Why shouldn't I just use the Quran? My simple response is I'm not going to make it my response, 'cause I feel like whenever I say an Islamic way, people are going to be like, oh no, it's Islam, so no. Let's say hypothetically the Quran said it. Would your answer change? And it wasn't hadith. That's my question to you. Because you're right. If a hadith, a random hadith said this, oh, how convenient, like, oh, number one, how can we prove the authenticity of the hadith? And number two, isn't that convenient? How about if the Quran said it? What would your
Well,
response
if
be?
the Quran said it based on doing an internal critique of Islam, you guys tell me that the Quran is infallible, but no Muslim says that the Hadith is infallible. And so
No, that's
that
not my
means that what
question.
I'm doing is I'm using a fallible Hadith to verify an infallible Quran.
Well, that's not my question, though. I'm saying the the proof I'm giving you, which is a fallible hadith, like you said, right? And we could go into that a bit deeper if we want to, but a fallible hadith. My question to you is, how about if the proof was not the hadith? How about if the Quran stated this in its surahs that it's going to come down in multiple different dialects and wordings?
Yeah,
How about that? Would you change your stance at all, or is this no? I don't care.
from based on the internal critique, if you have the Quran that was revealed over 23 years between Mecca and Medina, and you have several parts where it indicates that there'll be in totality these complete 7 different
Yeah, yeah.
versions, these other things, then I would say that much detail and information I would concede. But there's not that. The thing that's in the Quran talks about like abrogation, or that your
Just
Lord will
dialects.
only reveal, will reveal something different or similar, either something better. And so when they've got this distinction in there, it tells me that the Quran was very fluid. That the Quran, like for example, you can have, and some people don't know this, but you can have Mecca and Medina, uh, revelations within the same surah. And then when you look at like Muhammad never told them to like compile this into written form. This was something that they chose to do after his death, after the Battle of Yamama.
But there was always written form, but what you're talking about is when he died, they wanted to collate it together to be one book. But the
Are you
prophet
saying there
always
was
the
always a
prophet
written,
always
complete Quran, or
not complete. It was never complete. It was always in different parts throughout the entire areas of where the prophet was living. But the idea of collating it together was when the prophet died. Correct.
so the question is that you have him never wanting this, at least never indicating it like you need to do this. But then you have the Quran being revealed over this period of time where Muhammad would abrogate things based on what Angel Gabriel told him and replace certain things with something better or something similar.
But he
Now,
completed it before he died. All the qira'ats and all the interpretations. We didn't interpretations or extra wordings did not add after he died. It was complete when he was alive.
so is your claim that like in the 23rd year of Muhammad's life, that before he died, he
He didn't get it when he was
finalized
23. He got it
he
when he was like 40 or
finalized
50.
no, 23, the revelation was over 23
Okay,
years.
yeah.
So your claim would be that in the last year of his life, Angel Gabriel gave him the final version, the final seven, not Quran's, not to confuse anybody up top, but I think it's the seven Ka'at.
Yep.
Um,
Qira'ats, yeah.
and so you're saying that at that last year of his life, the angel Gabriel finalized that, and
Yep.
then Muhammad, each one of these Qurans would have taken 22 hours. So 22 hours to recite, because that's roughly how much it takes to long to listen to it.
They all
So times
recite the same
seven.
though. Do you not remember what I said about the oral tradition?
N-
They all recite
No,
the
no, no,
same.
no, no, because they have different vowelling, so there's different Arabic words being used. So you would actually have Muhammad would be over the period of time during the last year of his life over and over and over again reciting like could be up to 154 hours of different Qurans to different people, depending on their need or what would suit them.
Yes, and it's not that many hours. That's not how it works. I think you're collating it a bit incorrectly, but the gist is there, the logic is there, and that can be substantiated with the prayers that you pray and how many prayers you pray throughout the day with His people, and the idea of pushing them to understand that when I die, this needs to be presented around the world. So you must memorize. That's called hafiz. Hafiz mean memorizations of the Quran, which was in the thousands by the time the Prophet was there, and the assumption that it was completed when he died is incorrect. There was multiple battles that happened. I remember there was even a surah that said, whilst it was being revealed that people are going to die in a certain battle in the future when the prophet was still living, still healthy. That and when they do die in this battle, a handful of them are going to be the memorizers of the Quran. So the assumption you made that it was completed by the angel Gabriel right before the prophet died, that's incorrect. There was multiple years of multiple tens of decades before he had it, and it was completed and memorized. And I don't think you understand. In Islam, you need to pray 5 times a day. You need to repeat these surahs every single day. And in those times, you don't have any 9 to 5 working days. So all they do is sit in the mosque and recite the Quran every single day. And if you ask me as an individual, a Muslim person, to repeat the Quran in a different dialect, it will not take 155 hours.
So there was somebody did point out an interesting question in the back channel. They were wondering, um, so you think the Quran is infallible?
Can I just ask my question though? Because I think we just moved on to like 8 different questions. But when I asked you that one question, it reverted back to me answering some questions. My one question from before was, if your gripe with the hadith being fallible and that's why you don't take its answer of it affirming its prophecy of the dialects and the words, if that came from the Quran itself as a book, I know you're Christian, so you'd be like, I don't care. But if it came from the Quran itself, would you still have an issue? If the
If,
Quran said,
if,
if the angel Gabriel told the prophet as a part of the Quran that this will happen, word for word, do you still have an issue? You people, if Muslims use that to affirm the prophecy that happened in the future,
so the
because if you do, then your gripes towards these hadith things is
so
irrelevant because you
no,
have
no,
a problem with it even if it was a
no,
Quran.
I'm doing an internal critique. So if in the Quran itself that's supposed to be infallible, it mentioned that there's going to be these complete variations or recitations that are going to be distinctly different with these differences, then that would be something that I would say, okay, from an internal standpoint, you've got this and you've got all these versions saying this, but all we have to demonstrate that is what seems like theory crafting and a hadith.
I just said to you that the Quran, I asked you if the Quran affirmed this, forget the hadith and theory crafting. If the Quran affirmed this and the Prophet repeated it throughout his own recitations of it, would you still have an issue? Because if it's a yes, then my answers are irrelevant. That I can never explain these things to you. Because the critique from the non-Muslim would be that if it's not the Quran, I don't care. My question to you is checking the faith of this conversation is if that was the case and it's a still no from you, then I will never be able to explain anything to you about this topic or have a conversation
Well,
with
no,
you
I
about
already
it.
I already told
That's
you
like
what we're
that's like
doing in
me having
internal.
a conversation about the Bible and then you asking me if we find out the Bible is historically congruent and I respond to you and say, yeah, but still I don't care. Then you can't have a conversation with me about the Bible
Well,
anymore,
no, no,
can
the
you?
thing is that like while we're doing this, I would take based on your view from the internal critique that the Quran is infallible, and so we would look to see if there's any mistakes within it, and if the infallible Quran were to indicate what that hadith indicated directly, then I would concede that point. But
Okay.
I don't believe
Okay.
that the
Thanks. Thank you.
Quran does that.
Yeah.
But so the issue and the question from the back channel was they want to know, why do you believe that the Quran is infallible? Is it because this is what you've been told?
No.
Why would you say that the Quran is infallible?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to answer this. There's a prophecy way of saying things, which I would repeat when I was younger. use the prophecies within it and say on a rational basis, on a probabilistic basis, I don't think anything that is natural would be able to repeat a book of this nature with its prophecies that was affirmed in the past, that is being affirmed today, and we can clearly see it going to be affirmed in the future. That was my younger days, my explanation that kind of affirmed my faith. But growing up a bit further and like looking into more the spiritual side of myself and the joy and the fulfillment and the spirituality that is provided with its congruent Tawheed aspect of it, which is the oneness of God, and the way it could just affirm my rationality of understanding just one God, and how that for me, I believe every human's innate disposition to look at a higher power is just one entity and its power in creation, and not adding extra characteristics to it that'll only be required if you follow a Christian narrative. It touched me in a self-evident way. But if you want to have a debate about something a bit more empirical, I would say the prophecies 100%. On a probabilistic standpoint, I don't think it's possible. Like, I know it's not possible for something that is not metaphysical or supernatural to make those prophecies in the time that the prophet did. That's in a debate. And I'm assuming that's what we're having. But if I'll speak to someone to convert to Islam, I don't like using prophecies because I feel like that kind of removes the idea of faith and connecting yourself to God. You don't want to be proven to God because of prophecies. You want to be proven to God because of His message. And I believe the Islamic message is coherent, and I don't see any contradictions within the Quran whatsoever to elicit that it was human made.
Yeah, I'm trying to get this other Muslim gentleman to come back. Apparently, he had his hand up while we were talking.
Yeah, like I'm assuming you would say as a Christian, the Bible prophecies, which I'm not really that much aware of. I've looked into it, but I would assume you would say that's a proof, a side proof of the Bible being the Word of God, correct?
What was
Or
your
would you say
question? One
no?
more time. I'm trying to
Would you say,
message it.
just so for you to understand my argument, would you say as a Christian, if someone asked you why do you think the Bible is the Word of God, one of your arguments would be the prophecies within it?
Yeah, I would use the prophecies within the
Yeah,
Bible
so
would be
that's my
one of my
answer. Yeah.
arguments.
Yeah, that's my answer. And I would say the Quran has prophecies and also doesn't have any contradictions, unlike the Bible.
Well, that's debatable, the whole contradiction thing, but that's a
I've
separate
looked into it myself. As I'm talking about as an
conversation.
individual, right? As an individual, I've looked into the Bible in a very meticulous way, and the contradictions are very clear. I don't even feel
Yeah,
like I
but
need to
I've
have
looked into the
conversations.
Quran, and I think that like the different Qurans and the directly different words being used are contradictions. So we're both looking at each other's worldview, and you're saying that this appears to be a contradiction, but I'm telling you what appears to be a contradiction is these different versions of the Quran, and I don't think that it's reconcilable, which has been my main argument. And I don't
But there's
expect you
actual
to
church
believe.
fathers that have come out and said though that the Bible has had verses injected inside of it. There's actual
You're
come out
so
from
you're
church fathers.
so you're conflating a few different things. So, for example, in Christianity, if we run into an older manuscript, and let's say there's one verse not in it, there's a couple reasons why it might not be in that older manuscript. For example, the ending of Mark, like I think 11 through 16, in that chunk, it could have been the cover page, and the cover pages often get worn out. So maybe that initial manuscript had this, but it got lost from that manuscript. But because it's the older manuscript and we don't have it, we notate that in the Bible because of intellectual honesty, in the same
Yeah,
way with
that's the problem though.
supposed verses that are added. But the issue that I'm seeing is that if we did the same thing that you guys did for an answer, and I just said, hey, all these manuscripts are just variations of God's word and they just complement each other. Well, then now you can't like criticize anything because I'm saying I'm
Yeah, but
giving
that's the
you
yeah, that's
back
the bad
the
faith
same
interpretation.
the same but not I'm giving you back the same answer that you're giving me when I see direct issues. But so what we would say is that the communication or the Bible, like the message is infallible. but we would not argue that the text was all written verbatim from God, because in the Bible we have some words directly from God, some words from prophets, some words that are historical, like,
How do
from
you
like
how
an
do you how do you
historical
how can you
standpoint.
differentiate though? Then that's the point. How can you
Each
differentiate
each
between?
each thing like spells itself out. Like, for example, Jesus spoke in parables. We know that parables historically had maybe one to two meanings at that time. So if you're reading a parable, the parable is just trying to give you those two meanings. But if you read the parable in a literal sense, well, then you've just misappropriated the Bible. And the same way when you're looking at like the Old Testament, when it says, "Thus saith the Lord," that's supposed to be from God. God's seeing it. If you have the Ten Commandments, well, God wrote that with His fingers. If you have like the writings of Paul, well, we know that Paul was an apostle. We know that he wrote to Jews and Gentiles, but we know that primarily his ministry was with Gentiles. And so these are things that like we know from the historical context. So like I'm just saying is that if the way it looks for me is if we did the same thing that you did and we say, hey, it's just making it a deeper meaning, but all of them are from God. Do you see how you wouldn't like that? You would say that's a problem?
No, okay, can I respond? Yeah, okay. My
Yeah.
response is I feel like you're definitely being bad faith, and that's the problem. And if someone's being bad faith, then I will never be able to explain these things towards yourself, right? And that's the problem, right? Because for me to even accept in any way what you're saying right now, it would assume that I'm not having any percent of bad faith in my understandings of what you're saying. And if I were to do what you just did to me in the past conversation of how you've internalized what I've said, I would never ever be able to accept anything you said about the Bible because that's way more scrutinized. It's way more contextualized for someone to actually have a grasp of whether they want to accept the Bible has contradictions in it or not. I never once said that the Quran has random explanation, random wordings that contradict itself because we believe it just complements because the Prophet said so. We need to accept it. No, right? If you are arguing in good faith, you understand the word because it's oral tradition, the word changes are synonyms towards one another, right? In every example you're using, right? And unless you use one example you used 5 minutes ago, which is bad faith, two words without any context about what's being said about the story, and say, look, these two words said this and these two words said that, those two words mean two different things, even if maybe the story said the same thing, I don't care, these two words contradict, and boom, I've contradicted Islam.
So
Like
the so the
if I take that same critique and the same closed-mindedness with the Bible, then I don't care any type of church father explaining anything. The Bible at one part says one numerical example for something, like the king
so
being
the
something age,
so
and
the
another part
issue
of it said
is
another age, and it contradicted, so I
so
don't care.
the issue is that you have where Uthman put together the Uthmanic text, and then he sent copies of this around. Now, in that it doesn't say anything about Uthman putting together seven different copies to go to all these different places. It was like a recitation. Now, if you say that there are other recitations that have different words in them that can mean different things and can have apparent conflict because they're just highlighting the story in a greater light.
Apparent conflicts. I never said
Yes,
that. See what I mean, though? I
even
never said apparent conflict. I said the synonyms. I say the word synonym, and you
well,
change it to
Fareed
apparent
responds.
conflicts.
I'm just saying that Fareed responds agreed with me that even in like, for example, one Quran, setting aside the different word usages, when you run all the times it mentions the story of Moses, it conflicts. Like the
How? Give
the
me an
story is
example.
presented. I don't have those notes, but let
That's
me
the
explain out
problem.
the argument real quick. So Fareed response is an example for all these different times that it tells the same story slightly differently, that he's not quoting Moses verbatim, but that he's giving you um, like the picture, like he's giving you what happened, but
Yeah,
it's paraphrased. But
yeah.
that's Fareed response's way to get out of what seems like an apparent
But no,
contradiction.
but you need to explain how it contradicted. This is the problem here. How? What words were used? Because like you've showed your bad. No offense, you showed your bad faith 10 minutes ago when I asked you give me examples, and you used two words in an entire paragraph
Well,
without adding
no, no,
any. Let me just finish
I gave
without
you
adding any context. So
examples.
if you're gonna say
Well, no, 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 hang
that
on. I look,
Moses, the story of
no, no,
Moses.
you are accusing me of being bad faith, but I had this link up top that you could
It is
follow
the
me the
I've
whole
been looking
entire
at it. I
time.
haven't seen anything. I've seen the Arabic, which you can't read, right? But where's the surah? Where's the actual text? What chapter was it?
Are
What
you
surah was
trying
it?
to? So are you trying to? Look, I've pushed
I don't
back
do that
on
to
you.
the Bible.
You've moved a little bit on it, and I haven't like called you dishonest when you tried to say that everything was recited the same, and then I pointed out that it's not all recited the
It
same.
is recited the
That
same.
it is
Orally.
not.
Orally. You
No,
have to listen to what I'm saying.
no, no,
Orally.
no.
You just
You go
misconstrued
and
my
you
points.
no, no, because in some mosques, even today, there are people who know some of the different readings, and they will recite it one way, then they'll recite it another way.
How
They
do they
don't
recite
repeat
it? How?
themselves.
How do they recite it? Using totally different sounds or one word changed, but it's a synonym? You don't
It's
know.
it's
That's the
complete,
problem. You don't
it's a
know.
completely different word in some
Okay, but if as
cases.
long
It's
okay,
the list
you
above
need to.
shows you.
You're not my main point. The one word I'm using repeatedly. You're constantly responding to me with removing that word and giving its most negative connotation towards it. If you say a whole set story orally, but you have two narrations of it, and the only difference between two narrations is one word which is synonymous towards one another, what is the problem? You are that's the reason why I said it's bad faith is you're taking a word changing that's synonymous like ruler and king and saying now there's a story talking about Moses, and because synonyms change, it changes the entire meaning. Show me how the meanings change in
So
that
you
Moses story.
so
And please answer that
like
question, please. Because I've answered your
what you keep
questions.
doing. What you keep doing is you keep saying over and over and over again the one example that I said that hey, ruler or king could mean
I said
virtually the
that
same thing.
example.
But no, no, I'm saying that I said that you could use, and I would agree that they're relatively the same thing. But like, you never address things like where it says in this chart, we give mercy or he gives mercy. Who gives mercy, we or he? Is it both? Is it
What's the
one? Is it
story?
the
Give me
other?
the context. You can't just pick words and say, look at the difference, because the story can explain it, right? The idea, for example, ruler or king. Why ruler? Why king? The reason why we're able to explain it because we know the story was spoken about.
And
I
then
don't do
another one
what you're doing right
says
now. I would never do to the Bible. You can't just take words and say,
and
because I
another
could
one
do that right
says,
now if I wanted to.
he gives them or we give them. Is it he or we?
Okay, okay. Can I respond now? I'm going to do exactly what you're doing, and you're not allowed to add context to it. I want to take passages in the Bible that contradict themselves numerically, but you're not allowed to add any context to the story. Can we do that? Do you want to do that? Because that's what you're doing right now.
And then the other one, like
I,
they
So
lied
you
or
don't
they
want to
were lied.
answer. Come on, come on.
I
Don't rule
think
the
it's different with
conversation.
the Quran because you lot say there's only one Quran, so why would they be different words?
Emmanuel, I don't mind having that different conversation. My point is, right now, Emmanuel, hopefully you can be the third party here, is if you want to talk about words changing but not adding any context to the story around it, and I could easily do the same thing to the Bible, do you not see how that could be viewed as being bad faith?
So I'm not being bad faith. What I'm doing is I'm taking and I'm doing an internal critique, like I've said to you earlier. You're
Can you
telling
respond to
me that
anything I'm saying at all, or are you reading from the script?
no, I'm responding to you. You're saying to me that there's seven nakat, that there's these different recitations, and the different recitations we've agreed can have different vowing, can have completely different words that mean different things because all of them
I
complement
never
each
said
other
mean
from
different things.
perspective.
I said synonyms, bro. I don't know why you keep on changing my word. That's the fifth time. I'd never said different words that mean totally different things. I never once
So
said
are
that.
you saying
I
the
never once said
equivalent of
that,
they?
like at
So
all.
are you saying the
They cannot
equivalent of they
contradict
lie?
themselves.
Are you saying the equivalent of them saying they lie or they were lied to is completely compatible? That there is
Who's
no issue
speaking? What's the story?
on
What's the
faith.
story? If you understood linguistics, right, and how you tell stories, what was the story? Who was speaking? And in what perspective was it being spoken of? Because in different perspectives, they both mean the exact same thing. Do you not understand?
And,
Like, this is English 101.
And if
If
I
a
said
story is
to
spoken
you,
in first person and a story is spoken in third person, they both mean the exact same thing.
so think of it like this: if I said to Emmanuel, these
So
guys
you're just
got
not going
into
to
a
answer my question at all. You're not going to answer my question.
I'm trying to give you the example. If I
No, no,
said
but
Emmanuel,
what was my question to you? Like, you're being very. I've answered all
hang
your
on,
questions.
I'm trying to explain this to you so you can see all the objection.
No, no, but
Because
can you
I still
answer
think
any of
that
my questions, or there's no point carrying on this conversation?
I have answered your questions. Now, what I
What's
was
my
telling
question right
Emmanuel,
now?
if I said that the guys,
He's
hey,
ignoring
these
me.
guys fought outside my house, you couldn't automatically imply that just because they fought that they died. But then if I said, hey, these guys died, then you probably could look at that and say, well, if they died, there could have been a conflict. So I could see that. But if you only have the one that
What
says
was the
they
next
fought,
sentence after the first part? What was the next sentence? That's the
I, I,
point. Do you not understand?
I've given you. Well, the thing is that in this list up top and all these different things I've given you, it actually tells you where you can go to the Quran and see
Well,
this.
you're the one who's making the point. Prove it. It's not my point. The absence of evidence is on you. I don't have to prove your point.
Well,
You have to prove this.
so here's the thing. I've got a list up top that shows what I'm telling you is accurate. It even shows the different Arabic words.
Words,
What
just
you have
words. No
is your
context.
assertion that they complement each other because a random hadith that you're attributing to the Prophet says that there'll be these different recitations.
Are you done?
And
Are you
I think
done?
that's where we're.
Are you
I
gonna
think that
respond to any? Are you gonna respond to any questions I've asked at all?
what was one of your questions? Because I think we're pretty much done with the Quran.
Simple input, right? Do you think it's appropriate to critique religious texts by taking snippets, a couple words, and saying this says this here and this says that here? Yes or no? Without adding any context or anything about what's around in that chapter. Yes or no?
So I am adding context. So
Can you
no,
answer
but
the
I'm
question?
adding
Forget what you did in the
context.
past. Can you answer that
I,
question,
I
please?
said I said no, but I am adding
So,
context.
so
That's the reason I
can
did
you add the context when we're talking about the
it.
people that were stolen from? Yes or no? Can you add the context to that story? Go ahead. What happened?
The
What
the
chapter was it?
con
Who was speaking? Who were the people?
the
What was the
context
what was the next sentence after that word coming
you're
out? What was the
you're
entire
trying to
sentence?
you're trying to gish gallop,
It's one
and you're
topic.
not actually like letting me talk, and you're going into retreat mode or damage
I was
control mode.
speaking for a good 30
Please,
seconds before
please,
you cut me.
please don't like do that like retreat like where I have to
You know,
know
I
perfect
was speaking
Arabic
for
to
30
be able.
seconds, right? And then you are already cutting me off. Like I was only
If
speaking for
your
30 seconds.
criticism is like you were trying to level earlier, that because I can't read the Arabic myself, I can't critique it, then based on that standard,
Never
you
said
can't
that.
read
Never
Greek or
said that.
Hebrew,
I never
so
said read
you
the
can't
Arabic. The
critique
word
the
Arabic
Bible.
never came out. I never
Well, no,
said
you
Arabic.
told me.
I
You
never said
asked
you
me
need to.
several times.
You're
You
answering
asked me
another
several
question
times.
from 10 minutes ago. Answer the
You said,
question right
what does
now.
that
Answer
Arabic
the
word
question I
say?
just asked
And
you.
I told you, you said, what does that Arabic word say? And I told you
That
what
was not. I did not say that just
it
now. That was ten
says in
minutes ago.
English.
Answer the question I asked you just now. I didn't. That what you're responding to was 10 minutes ago. Do you see the problem here? What was the
No,
question I
my
just asked you?
context.
The reason why you're answering the wrong question is because you were cutting me off when I was asking you it, and now you're answering the different question.
I don't.
I would like
I
you to
don't
answer the
need.
Arabic question. I would like you to answer the
You
Arabic
do
question,
not.
but first
I
answer
do
this
not
question
need
here.
that. I
Can
do
you
not
answer the
need
question I asked you 5 seconds ago, please?
poor,
Not a question I
poor.
asked you 10 minutes
Look,
ago.
I said no. I bring context, but I do not need under
So
any
can you add the
circumstance.
context with that text you just spoke about? Yes or no?
You need to stop cutting me off,
It's
Bobby.
my question.
Bobby, you need to stop
Can
cutting
you
me
answer
off.
my question, please? Or should we just end the conversation?
Bobby, it's conversation's going to be over,
Because
and
you
I'm
can't
going to
answer the
wrap it up if
question.
you
I've
keep
been
cutting
answering
me off.
all your questions, but when we cross
You keep
examine you,
cutting me off
look
when
what
look.
happens.
You keep cutting me off when I'm trying to answer your question. When
That's
you're
not the
trying
question I
to
asked
force
you.
me, Bobby, one more time if you cut me off, you're in the audience, and I'll wrap this up.
Go on, answer the question and ask you. Go ahead.
So do not interrupt me, or you'll be in the audience. Then you won't get another response, and then you'll be upset. But if you do not interrupt me, you can stay on stage and you can respond to what I'm saying.
Am I allowed to answer, or do I have to be quiet, or are you going to mute me?
You cannot interrupt me or else you'll be in the audience.
Great
That's
way
what's
to have
going
a
to happen.
conversation.
Well, look, you keep cutting me off and I keep asking you not to. If you agree not to interrupt me and you don't interrupt me, you will get a chance to respond to what I'm saying. But that's on you. What you're doing is they call it suicide by mod. You're going to cut me off in a minute and then claim that I sent you down without giving you a chance. I'm asking you to not do that retreat mode, just to mute, let me finish, and then you can respond. Sound good?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So no, I bring context, but the context that I'm bringing does not need to be what that individual passage is about, because the claim that is presented to me is that the Quran is unchanging and that there is no different versions of the Quran and there's only one Quran. So I'm seeing these different Qurans that have different words that mean different things and different indications, and I'm being told that they complement each other. So I'm critiquing that view based on the information in the lettering above.
Right. So, can you answer my question, or am I going to get muted because I'm talking too much again? Because I just spoke for 10 seconds. Can I ask you a question? Am I allowed? Can I, or
Yes,
no, I'm
you
not
can
allowed?
ask me a question.
Okay. The story about the, lie, or let's use a ruler and king, or the story about he lied or they lied. What happened in that story? Do you know? Yes or no? And you don't need to talk about what I said 10 minutes ago about Arabic, whatever. I'm asking you, do you know? Yes or no? I'm not doing no got yous or anything. I'm just curious as to whether or not you know. That's it. And that's my last question, and we'll leave it there.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure with
All
each
right.
one of
See you
these
later. Bye.
examples.
What the fuck?
Bobby, so there you are running away. See, this dishonesty. Um, he wanted me to say that I didn't know the context for every single one of these examples, and that would be the truth. For the ruler and the king of the day, you could argue that the context is it's talking about God. We would understand that. Now, to remember like any other time this is used or the different like variations of this, I don't have that memorized, but I have read the Quran. But as you see, this was what happens when somebody gets cornered. He ran into an escape hatch and he is gone.
I go hard in the paint, yeah, homie, I'm a saint. Ride or die.